In the late 1930s, Franklin Roosevelt began his Fireside Chats with America. With the country in crisis, President Roosevelt spoke directly to the American people. Radio waves drifted into living rooms around the country, and families crowded around the radio to hear the words of strength and hope and unite the nation. In 2021, the New Canaan Society begins our series, Fireside Chats, with the hope of bringing wisdom, light, and hope to a country that's also in crisis. Good evening and welcome everyone to the NCS Fireside Chat, and I want to welcome you. My name is James Anderson. I'm the executive partner for the NCS National Office, and we're enjoying this little series that we've been doing for the last year, an opportunity just to get together, listen, and bring about a new perspective, or maybe think differently about the things that are front and center in all of our lives right now. I love Franklin Roosevelt's Fireside Chats from the 1930s and his view to speak as a unified voice. So tonight, that's our hope. And tonight, the man who's going to help us do that is Dr. John Townsend. And so, John, I want to welcome you. Thanks for being with us. You're a longtime friend of NCS and a guy that I've enjoyed getting to know over many years. But welcome. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Thanks, James.
So John, according to Wikipedia, you're an American author, but as the John I know, you have a lot more things you do than just being an American author. So you are a strategist, you are a speaker, you do business consulting, you do business and leadership coaching, you are a psychologist and an author. So you're a man with a lot of definite specialties, and I thought maybe we'd just walk down through each one of those, and I just have some questions I'd love for our folks to hear from you about. To start with, you have a very well-known book, Boundaries, and you talk a lot about when to say yes, when to say no, and how to take control. I think we're in a really weird place, and I think the fabric of our country is kind of coming undone. And I wondered what, from your perspective, after a lot of years looking at this, what do you see?
Well, James, you're absolutely right. We're not in a good place in the country, nor globally either. And from what I would call a boundaries lens, they're very blurred these days. One of the ideas that God gave us boundaries is so we could know who we were and other people were, because otherwise, when you take responsibility for somebody's life, we call that enabling in my world, all of a sudden things go upside down. That's where addictions come from. That's where codependency comes from. And we're seeing a lot of that on the front because of a lot of negative factors that are going on, for sure. But one of the things that you can depend on is that the Bible's rules are reflected in neuroscience rules. That's mainly what I study, is that neuroscience basically says that everything the Bible says about relationships and success and resilience and struggle, they're all in the Bible. They've been there for thousands of years. And the hard science has kind of proven that the Bible's got this. And one of the things that you have to come back to when the world's in this kind of state is Galatians chapter 5, where Paul talks about the fruit of the Spirit. And for male leaders, this is a big deal, because there's one there that says the fruit of the Spirit is self-control. It never says, James, the fruit of the Spirit is other control. We don't have the right, and we try to take care of and take responsibility for somebody else's bad behavior, somebody else's bad emotions, somebody else's situation. We're always supposed to care and influence people. But when we cross those boundaries of being responsible for myself and those around me and to other people, we go into other control. It's a big mess, and the boundaries are blurred these days. So I always tell the leadership people I work with is, let's clarify what your boundaries are and what you really can control. That'll give you mental health like that.
What do you see as the biggest area where boundaries have been overrun? Where are the fence lines been the most smashed up, just with all that's been going on?
Mainly in close relationships, unfortunately. Family relationships, close collegial relationships at work. When COVID first hit, so March a year ago, we found out that we lost a lot of individual dynamics because we're all in one place. I mean, you got a family of 4 or 5, they can't leave the house. And all of a sudden now, there's no time anymore, and time is a boundary. It's like day is night, night is day. We all sit around and, watch Netflix and eat brownies and drink wine. I mean, it was like at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It was crazy for a while. So I did a lot of research and came up with a number of skills there. And one of them is that in families where there are boundaries that are blurred and people trigger each other so much and people try to control each other and they nag each other and they get each other's business, is to put down a schedule of actual time things. When am I going to work out? When am I going to take a shower? When am I going to be working? And to have mom, dad, and the kids all do that. And all of a sudden, we found that the brain loves structure, James, and structure is the friend of good boundaries. And when people have a time structure, it helps them with a space structure. So like, I'm not going to walk into dad's room because he said this is his off time right now. I'm not going to walk into Junior's room. So when you add structures like that, the family gets better and gets healthier.
Well, it's super practical. John, your other book that I love about safe people talks a lot about the characteristics of healthy friendships and healthy relationships. NCS is entirely based on relationships, and that is the core of our structure. And I also just have seen there's a lot of really unhealthy friendships going on. And I think men have been exposed for having football friendships, for having golf friendships, and not having the kind of people they can call. And I just have too personally seen that guys are finding out too late that their friendships are not what they thought they were. So as someone who looks at healthy friendships and healthy connections, especially with men, what can we do so that we're not looking at these kind of stories after the fact, but we're building safe and healthy friendships now?
There's a lot we can do, James. In fact, my newest book, People Fuel, takes that concept from safe people and puts it into a very, very doable structure to have the right kind of people. Let me give you some of the things. The first thing to look for in a friendship is a thing called grace. Now, you and I understand that word. It means unmerited favor when we talk about a relationship with God, the vertical, what I call the vertical, which is God. But also, there's grace we've got to give each other horizontally, where I would never, like I have a life team of about 9 people. I think everybody needs a life team of about 3 to 10 people, somewhere in there, depending on how much bandwidth you have. That person has got to not have a bone of condemnation in their body, not a bone of judgment in their body. And they can disagree. They can say, I think you're crazy for saying that, or watch out, I think you're going to be in trouble, but not a bit of condemnation. That's what grace is, that person is for you. And so you have to calibrate your relationship to say, is this person full of grace or do they like judging me? Number 2, though, is they're full of truth. John chapter 1 said that Jesus came full of grace and truth. Jesus had grace. Jesus had truth. And truth means, do they give you reality? Do they love reality? Do they just want to talk about positive things all the time and never dig into deep things? For example, I see you as a person, we've been friends a long time. You've got both, James. You're very, very grace-oriented, but you know when to tell the truth, especially at running an organization like you are. You've got to remind people the truth all the time. So are they pro-truth? Can they give truth? Can they receive truth without judgment? That's the first 2. But the third one, especially for a guy, is harder, but it has probably more benefit than the other 2. It's a thing called vulnerability. Vulnerability. And vulnerability means you're willing to open up your mistakes, your losses, your past to other people. Mistakes, losses, and past. And be open about them. And the person needs to be able to do that with themselves and you with them. Now, that's hard for a man. They have to develop those skills. Women are better at this than we are, just kind of DNA-wise. But if you've got somebody in your life who's full of grace and full of truth and can be vulnerable, you've got a winner.
Well, that's well said. Yeah, I just think that men have realized that they have friendships of convenience, and the last 18 months has been a proving ground that unfortunately has not gone well. John, that's really good stuff. You should write it and put it in a book. And
let me get a pen here. Now, what did I say again, James?
it's high quality, John, I'm saying. So, all right, let's switch now from American author to psychologist. And obviously that's a huge part of everything you do, and it fuels the writing that you do. But I can't help but feel and see that things are kind of a mess right now with people mentally, just mental health, emotional health. And I mentioned to you before we started just that I'm really tired of getting the kind of emails I'm getting where I just see that people are in a spiral and we're finding out too late. I'm tired of getting those kind of emails and realizing that we had a guy that walked through this room and we missed him, or that's a guy should have returned his phone call, or those kind of things. And I think that we just have to realize how vital friendships are with men that are cloaked in, as you said, grace, truth, and vulnerability. But in the context of faith, for us to have a better, deeper relationship, because we never know when we're going to be the last person to hold that guy from being washed over the deck. And so as you're looking at what's happening with people in mental states right now, like that's got to be a big thing. Fear, anxiety seem to be a pandemic of their own and driving so many people. What do you see, and how do we recognize it? How do we push past it?
Yeah, unfortunately, we're seeing the clinical issues like depression, PTSD, stress is off the charts, anxiety, substance abuse, pornography, relational conflicts. They are several times what they were before all this started. In fact, in my world, because I'm in touch with a lot of therapists and psychologists and folks like that, they're all full. I mean, you can't even get to see them sometimes because everybody's coming in. I always tell people, before it gets to the washing over the deck level, there's really three levels that which you can be a friend to. There's the struggle level, and we always struggle in one of three areas. It's always one of three areas, James. You even struggle in your emotions and your behavior, like, I'm kind of moody, I'm kind of irritated, I'm withdrawn, or I've got some habits that aren't good. That's the personal level. The second level is the people level. And that's when either I have these fights that don't work out with my spouse or my kids or whatever, they never end, or I can't trust people. That's the people level. And the third level is the performance level. I'm not on my game at work. I'm not focused. I'm not creative. I'm not going after it. I'm kind of distracted. And so when you got those three as kind of the indicators, you look at the levels of severity. The first one I said was just struggle. I mean, I'm struggling. The second is called the clinical world. And that means it's gone worse than just, encouraging somebody, because something's happened to their dopamine in their heads. And they're going to need to see a good psychologist or Christian counselor to get that fixed, because they crossed what we call the clinical line from struggle to clinical issue. And the third is emergencies. Like you were talking about, were talking about before, there are some really bad things that are happening with the guys out that we know, that we love, that went too far. So as a friend, the thing to do for yourself and other people is don't let the conversation just be, let's think positive. There's a psalm that says that deep calls into deep. Your deep's got to call to their deep if you're going to save each other through God's program of health. And you look for the struggles in the area of how are you feeling in life, or how's your habits? How's your relationships? How's things in your performance and your work? And an honest guy will say, they really suck. I'm awful. But they haven't gone to the clinical level yet because they're not that severe, because you caught it in time. You caught it in time. There's a lot you can do to be there, grieve with somebody, support somebody, tell them you love them. That keeps her from going to the clinical level. That's how we can minister to each other as guys in the body of Christ.
John, I see a lot of guys, the guys I talk to, I feel like when you kind of push in on them a little bit, the word embarrassed keeps coming to my mind, that the way I think men feel is that they have so much lack of control and they feel so exposed that it's the word embarrassed, which is a word that's never kind of come to me in thinking about the NCS men. But I think describing them, I'd say some of them are embarrassed. Some of us are embarrassed by how exposed we feel and how little control we have. And where do you see that coming from, and what's the way out?
Well, it's a big problem, James, and it comes from what I call the shame monster. All embarrassment comes from shame, which is a feeling that I am too damaged to be loved. That's all shame says. I'm too damaged to be loved. That if you knew the real me I'm a CEO, I'm a middle manager, I own my own side hustle, I own my own thing, I own my own entrepreneurial thing, but I'm struggling. If you knew how my life is going, if you knew how my relationships are going, if you knew how I felt about myself, if you knew how my business struggled, you would reject me because I'm so dysfunctional and I'm so damaged that you would do that. It's a big problem because people sometimes will do damage to themselves to avoid the embarrassment or shame you're talking about because the pain is so exquisitely awful, especially for a guy. So the way you help with this, if you've got a guy in your life and he feels like that, the best way I can tell you is when you're talking to him, you take the first step in exposure. You take the first step in vulnerability. Instead of, life's great, we're going to make it. Yeah, I went to church 4 times last week. We all know that. That's great. But you just say, I got some struggle in some areas. And what you've done is you've kind of made the playing field level. It's not like you're coming as this perfect Christian business guy who's saying, oh, you're an idiot. You're coming and saying, it's hard for me. And that takes care of the shame monster on their end. And they begin to go, you're talking about you and I respect you and maybe I can do this too. That's the first thing, is expose and then be vulnerable yourself. But number 2 is you make it explicit. You make it explicit and you say, hey, we only got an hour together and we're all busy. And I want to tell you some things I'm struggling with, but I want to let you know, I want a shame-free zone here. I don't want to just talk about, I want to talk about sports. I want to talk about money. That's great. But I also want to talk about life. So I'm expecting to not deal with anything that's not going to bring shame. I'm okay with exposing without shame. Are you? And you challenge them a little bit. And they begin to find out this cool thing. That guy is not afraid of opening up, and he's not ashamed. Maybe I can do that too. You're giving them permission.
That's good. So John, another thing that you spend a lot of time on is in the area of business consulting and leadership coaching. The whole economic landscape has changed. Life has changed, business has changed. There's a lot of that embarrassment, a lot of that lack of control. Whether it's you own a business and you can't find the staff people you need to keep it open, or things have changed and regulations and restrictions are happening, whatever the case may be. It's just, there really is no back to normal. And you spend a lot of time in this. And I'm just wondering, when we say leaders lead, right now that can be really tough. It could be a pretty crappy assignment. How does somebody reset so that they can lead?
It's a hard time to be a leader, but if we all took the leadership hat only when times were good, that's sort of not great. So this is the time we're being called on, and leaders do lead. And so I've developed models with the companies and corporations and family business I work with to help them with that, because something's got to happen. Number 1, above all, is you've got to review your mission. What's our why? You and I talked about a why before the show. Why are we on the earth? We are Smith shoes. We sell shoes. And Smith shoes, what's your purpose? Because the reason for the mission is it's a compass and an anchor to keep you centered in what's important. A friend of both of ours, Andy Stanley, says it this way. He says, marry the mission and date the method. And I think that's really good. You marry the mission, it's consistent, but you date methodology, and we're going to different methodologies now in a changing world. We've got to be flexible, we've got to be resilient, we've got to pivot. Secondly, is you owe it to your people to be steady. So take your insecurities somewhere else. Now, don't be in denial, but don't be the one who's sitting there at the board meeting saying, I don't know any more than you guys know. Oh, it's all going to go, No, take that to your life team and take that to your friends, take that to your church. They need somebody who's steady, not in denial, but somebody they can trust and go, person has to set steady hand, because we lost steadiness during COVID. Third thing is listen to their fears. So many times leaders will say, I think it'd be discouraging to talk about their fears, but that's what's in their heads. That's all they're thinking about. Am I going to lose my job? Is Is my kid getting sick? So listen to their fears empathetically, and you can't offer answers for a lot of this stuff. All you can offer is presence and comfort. Be a good active listener, to be present and comforting. And then once they feel heard, Heard, once they feel like, oh, my leader gets it, then you say, here's how we're going to be successful. And you give them some principles of how marketing should go, how the KPIs should go, how the budget should go, how the finances should go. And they relax. Don't give them the structures of success. This is the really big mistake leaders make. Don't give them the structures and strategies of success until you've heard their fear and really paid attention to it.
Okay, so let me kind of tie two of the things together we just talked about. So you talked about don't bring your insecurities here and don't bring, that soup sandwich to what we're trying to do here. We need like confidence and vision. But we also know, people ask me, how are you, James, and how are things going? And I say, I'm good. I feel like things are going well, but I don't know that I know anything more than I knew yesterday. And there's an instant point of connection with other people who are like, I know we're making decisions in pure darkness. Like there's not a horizon, there's not a star to guide us. There's no way to navigate. And did I make the right choice today? And I'm asking myself that the next day, looking back and wondering, do I know anything more now than I knew yesterday when I had to make the decision? Do I have any more confidence I made the right decision because I made it with whatever I had, which wasn't much? How do you bring vulnerability and insecurity together? I mean, there's insecurity is that not knowing, and vulnerability is being okay that I'm not perfect and you know it. How do you do that with strength as a leader that breeds confidence on a level?
It's a really important question, James. And I always tell people, well, you do know something, or you wouldn't be that leader. Now, information is changing day to day, but that doesn't mean we don't know something. And so I think a good leader says, there's a lot I don't know, and I am whistling in the dark here, but I'm seeing this. And you know what makes people calm down, James, is when you talk about trends. If all we talk about is yesterday and today and all this, they feel psycho. But when we say, slowly, as your leader, I've been looking at all the research in our sector, in our industry, and whatever, I'm beginning to see a trend this way in the banking industry, in the mortgage industry, in the medical supplies industry. And when you tell them, there's a lot I don't know, but I see a few trends, James, people calm down and they go, I'm being led. He's honest that there's a lot he doesn't know, but he's seeing certain things that are facts as the trend lines change. People really rally and feel calmer when they have a leader that can talk about trends.
That's been a part of a conversation you and I have had a lot. You talk a lot about trends. In fact, you told me that bell-bottom jeans were going to come back. I didn't believe you. And you told me that we were going to move into an era of boy bands and you were going to work to get into one. And I thought, that's not real. That's not going to happen. But both have come true. And I felt led. I feel comforted now, actually, just realizing that I just realized you were my compass, John. So before we run out of time, man, let me ask you this. So you have psychology, you have the practicals of watching this get implemented in business consulting, leadership coaching. You're seeing it played out in your books and your podcasts and the programs you're doing. But another big part of your life is how you're taking all of that and putting it together with the Townsend Leadership Institute in Southern California. Tell me what's happening there. Tell me about the trends you're seeing there, and tell me what's good.
Yeah, it's really kind of fun, James. In a period of crisis, people look to education as maybe this is the time to get a step up, and people kind of say, maybe by the time this is over, I'll be at a different level. So we are the Townsend Institute of Leadership and Counseling. We're fully online, fully accredited, and you can get a master's or a credential in either organizational leadership, going to lead, executive coaching consulting if you want to consult or coach, or a master's in counseling if you want to get licensed. It's all my material, all the books. It's also got all the neuroscience in it. It's biblically based. And now we've been around about 5 years. We've grown on a scale level. And now we're getting the feedback after 5 years that people are getting great jobs and great opportunities because they're going out there and they're able to get the jobs and also compete in the jobs and coming out the top. I had one person that graduated, and before she graduated, she had to work in HR and had to help two people that were fighting to get together. Her boss came to her and said, "How did you learn how to keep these two people fighting?" Because it was marketing versus finance. They didn't like each other. She said, "I use these principles that I learned at the Institute." He said, "I'll pay you all the rest of your tuition, and I'm going to put you on the executive council." So we're putting out people who are getting great security and great jobs. It's an exciting time.
Wow, that's a great story. I enjoyed looking at some of your fellows and the people who partner with you. You've got an impressive list of people that you and I share in common in some ways, and some people I respect. And so good attracts good, John, and I'm happy for you. And I appreciate you being with us here tonight. I'm going to give you the last word. You've been around NCS for a long time. You've been to lots of our retreats. That's where you and I first met. And you have a unique perspective on what's going on. And I'd love to have you close with just some thoughts on why is NCS vital for men, and what do they need to go into it looking for?
I believe the New Canaan Society is a primary tool from God that helps men to be everything they need to be spiritually, to be great family guys, to be emotionally healthy, and to work and accomplish great things, making great businesses and great organizations. And I think the secret sauce is that you and your folks, James, you basically tell them be real. Because when men to get together and they can be real, miracles happen. It kind of reminds me of Ecclesiastes chapter 4, where Solomon says, when you fall down, who's going to lift you up? Well, God certainly lifts us up. But in the Hebrew in that verse, it says people. And NCS is a place where you're welcome, whatever your level of struggle and whatever your level of success. And I think it's just primary.
That's wonderful, man. I appreciate the endorsement. And I appreciate you and your great history with us. And I appreciate your time tonight. So, John, my blessings to you, my gratitude for you, to you for all that you've done for us and for just being a part of my life, part of NCS, part of lives of so many. And I just pray that God will continue to bless all the people, especially the young people coming through the Institute, people who are picking up books.
People go to the Institute too, James.
What?
Old people go to the Institute too.
I know, but I'm especially praying for the younger people. They're the future, John. That's what you told me. You said, James, you're the future. And so
Yes, I did.
Yes. So there are people all over, man. And but no, John, I'm thankful for you, and I wish you nothing but the very best and great success. May the Lord bless you and keep you, my friend. And it was wonderful to see you tonight.
Thanks, James.
I want to thank all of you for spending a little bit of time with us here tonight, and thankful that you could join me and Dr. John Townsend for the NCS Fireside Chat. I hope that what John shared will be in some way a personal opportunity for you. He said plenty of things that really dug into me. So I was sitting and listening myself, and a great deal of that was ringing home. So I hope it was true for you as well. So thank you for joining me. Thanks for joining the New Canaan Society for this evening's event. And if you need to find out any more information about any one of our chapters around the country or in a few other countries, you can check us out at newcanansociety.org. Thank you. Have a great night.